Welcome to Voices of Life, a podcast dedicated to celebrating the inspiring members of life and friends of life. In each 20-minute episode, we invite listeners to discover the remarkable stories, experiences, and insights of Lebanese professionals who are part of our global network. My name is Ronnie Hammad. I'm a board member and chair of the Advocate Committee of Life, and I'll be your host for today. In 2009, a visionary group of Lebanese professionals convened in London with a bold ambition to create Life, the Lebanese International Finance Executives. Their mission was clear and inspiring: to build a global professional network that empowers the Lebanese community. Initially focused on finance professionals, Life expanded its horizon in 2020 to embrace the fields of consultancy, law, and tech. Today, Life boasts a thriving membership of over 1,700 individuals across 20 chapters on 5 continents. To shed light on the origins of this remarkable journey, we are joined by Paul Raphael, one of the founding members of Life. Paul is currently the founder and partner at Aurea, a firm dedicated to investing in high-growth, beauty, wellness, and longevity brands. His distinguished finance career includes senior roles at UBS, Credit Suisse, Merrill Lynch, and Salomon Brothers. Paul Raphael, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ronnie.
Paul, tell us about your journey in the early years as you emigrated to the United States.
Ronnie, there were formative years, and when you say formative, it was challenging. I did what I was told at the time in terms of what I should study. My dad said, finance. So I said, yes, sir. But then how do you go about that? This was a war-torn country, and I didn't even know how to begin to apply. I went to a dusty office of Amethyst. I found only 2 application forms left.
In Hamra, right?
In Hamra Street. And I think the door was broken in and there was no one there, and just found on the floor, 2 application forms, one for University of Maryland. I didn't know where Maryland was. And University of Tulane, which I thought was another state. I didn't know Tulane was a state, but obviously it was not. It was in New Orleans. So I applied to these 2 universities through friends who were traveling and took those envelopes with them, and who were kind enough to write a check drawn on a U.S. bank for the registration fee. And, one thing led to another. I had to cross the green line at the time to take my SAT, my TOEFL, apply for a visa, and the mountain looked unassailable, actually. But, one step at a time, we managed to eventually get a letter in the P.O. box that said, you're welcome to join the community of both universities. So I got a one-way ticket to Maryland, and I didn't know anyone in the U.S., and so you'd have to figure it out on your own, which is why it was quite formative. So at the time, I really didn't know what I was doing, is the reality. There was no one to drop you at school, no one to, talk to anyone. So you have to grow up very, very quickly, which for me was highly energizing, actually. It was a kind of a watershed moment of growing up. So it was a great experience, even though it seemed daunting at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I grew up, when I left for the United States, I didn't know how to open a checking account. I didn't know how to write mail. I didn't know how to manage basic things. And you grow up very quickly when you get to that stage at the age of 18 or 19. So tell us about those early years. You studied finance, you got an MBA, and how did you manage in this really cutthroat industry of finance in New York at that time?
In the early years, you feel like an imposter. Like, what am I doing here? I must have interviewed really well, but I'll be found out at some point because, everybody around me seemed a lot smarter, more experienced, more steeped into that lingo, that language.
And probably a bit more articulate, they have a certain way of presenting and projecting.
Absolutely. I remember the first time I had to get up and talk to someone about a deal I had worked on, a group of colleagues. My hands were wet, my voice was trembling, and they seemed so effortless in the way they would present. But I think it was important to two things really. One, to embrace and enjoy the work. For me, it was kind of a pinch me moment. Like, what am I doing here on Wall Street? I remember my office was on the 42nd floor of the southernmost tower in Manhattan.
Oh, wow.
Facing the Statue of Liberty. And every day I'd go to the office. Of course, it was a shared bullpen, but still my office was backing into the East River and the Hudson. And it was kind of, I better not mess this up because I'm here. And so partly fear, partly exhilaration, and mostly hard work, actually.
Yeah. There's a story you tell about your time at Solomon Brothers, where, you probably had to go through this 2-year, very intense training, and you were approached to join a certain professional group. And I think that's kind of what triggered one of the ideas about starting up an organization. And so maybe share that experience with us. And
I was approached in year 1 by a colleague who said, Paul, you should join the Wall Street Jewish League. And I said, what's on offer? And it was literally the kinds of things I felt I would have benefited from, interview training, mentoring, but being also mentored by someone more senior in another organization in case you wanted to move. That would be helpful. But of course, if you want to stay where you were, at least advise you, mentor you through the roadblocks and the competitive nature of the jobs we were in. So it was obviously highly interesting and eye-opening. And clearly I was at Solomon, so it was a very large community of Jewish professional, historically founded by a group of Jewish partners. And I obviously didn't join, but this idea stayed with me. And I kind of thought to myself, one day I'd love to do that in a way to help people from my country who were going to struggle otherwise. Yeah. And I remember, speak to a few of us who were Lebanese in finance at the time in New York City. But as far as I recall, we were like 5 or 10 of us, so we didn't need such an organization at the time. But I wanted us to grow the ranks of us and figure out a way to get more people, whether they lived in the US or in Lebanon, to really have the confidence to apply, to join, to grow, because ultimately finance and Wall Street really touches everything in the world economy. Yep. And I always say it's the blood that runs in the veins of the global economy. So it's an enabling career.
Industry.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about this mentorship thing, but I always think about, in addition to mentorship, it's really that sponsorship, somebody who sponsors you to take you up to another level. And so that planted the seed, I guess. So years later, you and a group of senior finance professionals in London got together and decided you wanted to create this organization. So tell us about the thinking. What were you trying to accomplish? What was the vision? What were your ambitions at the time?
So if you move that movie fast forward, it was 2009. And it was 3 years after the summer war of 2006. And at the time, I had already reached senior ranks. I remember I was at Credit Suisse at the time, where a few of our employees were of Lebanese descent or Lebanese stuck in Lebanon. And we arranged through Credit Suisse a chartered jet. And luckily, we had some room on the jet. So we said, can we share the news with other banks in London who might have Lebanese professionals stuck in Lebanon? So we started an email chain, which email didn't exist 20 years prior.
Correct.
And we ended up with a couple of hundred names.
Wow.
Which I thought I knew maybe max 10, 20, and that's all there was. But there were 200 Lebanese professionals in the city of London on our database, just like that in 2006. Then I thought we should do something with this. 2006, I had to move to Hong Kong for a couple of years. So I was further away. But when I moved back, I said, let's keep going. And so the idea wasn't formed in my head, but I knew there was one perhaps word in my head that we needed to rally everybody around, which is the word solidarity. Solidarity with each other, with the next generation, with the country. So, but what do we do? How do we execute? And I think our strength was really around the fact that we had come from business, not from charitable institutions or academia, where we could put in place more business-like scaling levers. And so I also didn't want to have it top down. I didn't want it to be the vision of any one person. I wanted it to be the vision of a group of people. I wanted it to be as a result of a debate, so you can get buy-in. So after a few separate conversations, separate dinners, we organized, I remember at the Royal Automobile Club in London, a roundtable of approximately 30 people, each of whom spoke about what their vision would be. We summarized it, and I'd say 90% of what was said coalesced around three reinforcing pillars. One was, by definition, why don't we help each other out in our professional lives? Because rather than refer something, a business to someone you don't know, why not refer to someone within your community? The second was helping the next generation. Mm-hmm. Let's speed up and, as you said, sponsor or multiple students or early professionals into their career, and it kind of acted as a career accelerator. And the third was give back to the country in some way, to be defined.
Yeah.
But I would say that day was sometime in May 2009. We coalesced around that vision, around these three pillars, which we ended up defining as connect, nurture, and promote.
Yeah. How has life evolved over time? And do you think of any key milestones that you were able to accomplish, and maybe talk a little bit about the values? Because to me, that's a critical aspect of what makes life so compelling as an organization.
Look, in the early years, the vision and values related mostly to giving the next generation an alternative vision of our country. Because at the time, the country was struggling. It had,
it's still struggling, man.
Been through a very difficult civil war and was struggling again under a regional tension and local tension. And a number of our children would ask, what is so special about Lebanon? And obviously would come and go, and the food and the skiing and the beaches. But I wanted, and a group of us wanted to create a canvas where you can kind of add these little dots of success stories that formed one mosaic, one canvas, that if you stepped away, it was something to be proud of, to say that's the alternative Lebanon, that is a truer Lebanon, and clearly more numerous Lebanese on that canvas than there are in Lebanon per se. So we wanted to create an aspirational force for the next generation and for the more senior Lebanese to say, I belong to a community. So the values really were around being selfless.
Selfless,
mm-hmm. Winning by making others better, mm-hmm. and creating a sense of authenticity, vulnerability, being willing to be open, not just about the front end of the CV, look what I've achieved.
Wow.
But how hard were these transitions in between what you achieved? So those were the values that we generated in life. And I think, Ronnie, you went to a few offsites, but the first one, I think you probably, I recall, saw that with your own eyes.
Yeah. I recall very vividly this conversation we had. I mean, the first time somebody said, would you want to join this finance organization? And all I thought it was about Lebanese bankers. And I had a less than flattering view of Lebanese bankers. But I thought, I met Mark Malik, and I met you, and I met a couple of others. And I thought, well, maybe there's something here. And you said, look, you'll only understand it if you come to the leadership offsite. And I went to London, and I remember I met some of the most extraordinary people I ever met. And not just Lebanese. I mean, just people who were really committed, wanted to give back, check their egos. These are very senior people, but really were the conversation was about how can we do better for our community, our country, our future generation, and it was just the most inspiring thing. And I think that's what turbocharged my own engagement with life, and because I try to commit as much time as I can to life, because I feel like it really makes a big difference and the impact it is. And I wondered if you could maybe just share a little bit about this idea of what makes life special. Because I think one of the words you used, which I really love, is that something called the curated membership.
Mm.
What was that idea about, and how do you wanted to create a curated membership?
Look, we called it Life because we thought it would be catchy, and we thought it would be branded over time. But initially, it defined the curation. You had to be Lebanese, you had to be international, you had to be in finance, and you had to be an executive. So you had a certain seniority. So once you cleared those hurdles, it was membership by invitation or by referral only. So either the organization invites you or a member refers you and the local chapter approves you. So there was a certain level of kind of a club, but in a manner that would really give you the right to contribute, not the right to take.
Yeah.
And once you join that kind of mindset of a club, then you know that a few hurdles have been met and that you almost automatically want to, let's say, find a lawyer in New York that could help you set up your startup. Why not, look up our directory and find a couple of Lebanese who are members. Clearly, they've been cleared. And if they're on the directory, they volunteer to be called and to be reached out to. Or if you want to, fundraise in Abu Dhabi and you don't know the lay of the land in terms of sovereign wealth funds, you can just look up on our website, Sovereign Wealth Fund, Abu Dhabi, and you find a number of Lebanese in any number of sovereign wealth funds that are happy to take your call and because you're also a member of Life, so you're in a way legitimate and you're not going to waste your time. So it's trying to create a reason to reach out in a win-win situation, because that sovereign wealth fund is not doing you a favor. They're in the business of investing and you're in the business of providing investment opportunities. So it's ultimately a business matching structure that we created. And it was all about scaling solidarity on solid grounds. And
I like that, scaling solidarity. That's fantastic. One thing you're proud of the most about Life?
The irony of this is I'm most proud that I only served the first 4 years as chairman, because we have term limits. And at the time, a number of people said, no, can you serve a little longer? And I had to say it was a bit of a suspended belief that it could go on. And it went on from strength to strength. And that honestly is what I'm most proud of, that none of our initial 15 board members are today on the board. And the organization has renewed itself on and on. So, indirectly, obviously, it would be the governance framework. The governance framework we put into place. I take no credit for that. A couple of colleagues told me, no, Paul, this is not good enough. And I was rolling my eyes, and those two or three committee members of the board worked on this governance that really held us in good stead.
I can imagine Paul Raphael being a chair for 20 years, but you don't want to do that.
Absolutely.
And I suspect probably one thing you should be very proud of is the impact of Life. And I think that's something that you really should be very proud of.
Yeah, look, ultimately it was about creating impact. And I mentioned, kind of the business mindset. So when if you'll allow me just a digression, we set up Life really as a business initially. And so as a business, you need a shared vision. You need a world-class governance framework to optimize decision-making, enhance debate, but ultimately make decisions. We had term limits. We had really a third of the board required to be renewed every year, which is quite aggressive.
Continuity.
We were well funded from day one. We had a full-time staff, financial sustainability. We had a full-time staff. I don't believe volunteer organizations are sustainable.
Absolutely.
And ultimately we had a big commitment to transparency. So our accounts are audited and published, and our donor lists are published. So it was very important to really start with those basics. So if you have the pillars right, ultimately you have a greater shot. No guarantees at having an impact. So I think that, but ultimately what most touches me is the impact. So when a couple of years ago, walked around with a couple of Life members, Jemaise Street, and I saw the plaques of how many buildings Life had helped rebuild or contribute to, that was really heartwarming. When I look at various sites about relating to some of the students that benefit from our sponsorship. That was heartwarming. When I'm at social events and students come up to me or young professionals come up to me and I've never met them, but they say, I understand you were part of the founding this organization. It changed my life. Major impact. Job creation in Lebanon. Major impact. And we're talking about affecting, tens of thousands of people's lives in a number of ways. And I'm, skipping, the whole laundry list. So ultimately we founded it for impact, and to be able to measure impact and to get the witnessing actually the témoignage of so many of these people, it's heartwarming, and it's ultimately full circle now, because I have 2 daughters who are members.
Finally, in 2030, 2035, what do you see life?
Look, I do believe we're still only scratching the surface of this seam that we've kind of touched, and we're nearly 2,000 members. If you think about the diaspora being between 10 and 20 million, if you take 1% of those people, literally you can be at 200,000. So I do see the organization growing into the tens of thousands, without risking kind of the reputation or
the DNA
or the standards that we've set for ourselves. Because every passing year, I see more and more success stories of Lebanese in increasingly new fields, whether it's AI or fintech, or very interesting fields like, new wineries or, things that you wouldn't think of, that people have created massive amounts of wealth and who are really looking to give back.
Yeah.
And we're finding people increasingly in, North Carolina and, Sao Paulo and Mexico City and not the usual finance hubs that you would think, who are looking to give back and who haven't found in the past a platform that they trust or they can project themselves onto, that can help them scale. So rather than do it themselves, they can do it through Life. And what I also see at Life in the future is an ability to say join, and not to fit in, join to add what you want to do and influence the direction of the organization.
I love
so
that.
If you have an idea, join Life so you can execute it. And that to me is highly empowering and inspiring for each of our members.
On that note, Paul, thank you so much for your time, for your commitment, and for the extraordinary leadership that you've delivered for this organization. I think we're all really proud of what you've done and what all the founders have done. And Thank you for listening to Voices of Life, where stories connect us and purpose moves us. Join our global network and be part of Lebanon's brighter future, wherever you are. To learn more about Life, visit our website and follow us on social media. Thank you.